Hello. So this video is going to help you with your endangered species stamp project. We're going to be creating this in Illustrator, and the goal is to create the simplest, cleanest vector graphic of your endangered species animal that we can. So to start off with, I'm in Photoshop. And the reason I went into Photoshop, as you can see, is I went through and brought in my image. I'm going to be doing this illustration on a rhinoceros, which is an endangered species, the white rhino. And what I did is, this was just for me so that I could get a value study, so I could figure out what areas I'm going to keep, what areas I'm not going to keep. So if you look, what I did is I just placed it in and lowered the opacity and created another layer above it to trace out the area. So if I simplify it, you'll see this is kind of what I have. Now remember, this project is not supposed to be done completely in Photoshop, but you can use the tools that you have to make this easier. You might want to use tracing paper and a pencil or a pen and just trace over it, but I'm using this to figure out what those values are and what I want to keep, because I want to keep it simple. So, and you can see if I zoom in that areas are going to be filled in with black. I've just kind of like indicated with X's. I've filled in a few areas just to show you. But so now that that's done, I have saved it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Illustrator. And when I go to Illustrator, you'll see that I've already imported it and I have it in here. And this is what happened, or this is how I did it. I went in Illustrator, I went to File, Open, and I picked my rhinostudy.psd, and then I hit Open. And what it does is it gives me some Photoshop importing options. So I'm showing the preview, and I'm going to convert layers to objects, and I'm not going to flatten the layers, and I am going to import hidden layers, because I remember in the last version of this Photoshop document that I had, the background image was in fact hidden. So I need to say import it. So I'm going to say all right, and here it is. And if you look over here on my layers, there's my hidden layer of the image. There's the image that I traced out in Photoshop. So, and I was planning on putting like the price in this area, the price of the stamp, the species name, as we were supposed to. So I can click on this and I can do object, image trace, make. And if I do that, it's going to trace over the drawing that I did in Photoshop and create hopefully some halfway decent line art. So I'm going to say OK. Now the reason why I didn't use trace and expand, or make and expand, is because I may want to adjust this a little bit, because I did have some fine lines. So let's take a look here, see if I lost any detail. And I think I did lose some detail. So I'm going to come over here to my image trace window, and we can actually see some of the different variations of what it might look like. Boy, that's with less detail. And this is with more detail. Oh, that's great. I'm really liking that. I'm really liking the different, the way it handled some of those pencil strokes, or pen strokes rather. So I'm going to go with that. And now I'm going to go object, expand. And I've expanded it because what I'm going to eventually want to do is get rid of that white. So I'm going to use my direct selection tool, select the white areas, and hit delete. Now I do see that I got to come back here, and I need to fix this, or join up this side of the horn on the rhinoceros, and I can do that by selecting this piece and grabbing either my paintbrush tool, but I might use my blob brush tool. Now this brush is probably going to be pretty weird, but what the blob brush tool does is it joins those pieces together. Now what I can do, which would be kind of nice, is I'm going to Command Shift A to deselect, and then come back here to my blob brush tool, and I'm going to choose a different point. I'm going to go ahead and edit it. So, and I'll make it like just half a point. And now when I come back here, if I select this part Actually, I'm going to go Object Ungroup. If I select this, Object Ungroup one more time. There we go. Now when I grab my blob brush tool, I can add to that point, and you'll see that's what I've got. Now I can also come here and I can select, I think it had still had the white there, so I'm going to select these two pieces, this piece and this piece, and I'm going to join them together with my Pathfinder. So now they're together. That means I can select this piece and punch them together. Now I've got that weird little crook there, but if I take my direct selection tool, I can, if I hit Command Shift A, deselect it, click on those edit points, I can move these nodes around until I get them the way I want. Or there's also the delete an anchor point tool. I can get rid of some of these anchor points. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Now I'll be honest, this is probably way too precise for this, so I'm going to delete it. See, these are so small, it's really hard for me to select it, so I really have to zoom in. And I'm going to delete my anchor point, delete it, delete this one, delete this one. I don't know what that's going to give me. But the point is, the fewer edit nodes, the fewer anchor points that I have, ideally, the smoother this whole thing is going to be. So there's way too many right there. Get rid of that one. That one, and that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. And all the way down the line. And then I can take my direct selection tool and I could edit, Command Shift A, and click on this and grab this little handle and make it smoother. So that's one way to do it. If I started in Photoshop, I can use those Photoshop lines as part of my Illustrator work. It's really, really helpful. But let's say I don't want to go into Photoshop and do it. So I'm going to do a quick tracing of this animal. So here's my image, and technically I can probably double-click it, double-click this layer, make it a template, and it's going to dim the images a little more, and that way it should be easier for you to see. Then I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to start tracing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my pen tool. I'm going to make sure that my pen tool is set to have a stroke and no fill, and I'm going to do, let's focus on his leg over here, or her leg, whatever it is. So, and this is really key, this is important. So when I go to trace, I don't want to do this, because it is going to look like it is an 8-bit tracing of this rhinoceros, right? Because it is going to be jaggedy. So yeah, technically I'm tracing it, but that does not look good. So Command Shift A to deselect, and then I can hit this and delete it. What I really want to do is create the shape with as few edit points as possible. I want to make sure that I try to create the smoothest look that's appropriate for the animal. So now I'm going to click, then my cursor is loaded. I'm going to click down and drag. And I'm going to click, click, click. I'm clicking and dragging actually. So, and then hit Command Shift A and take a look at it. Now one thing that's really, really important to note, let's go ahead and trace some of these little folds right here. If I go click, even on a small segment like this, I'm going to want to hit click and drag. So let's just say I come here, and then I'm going to make a big kind of like part. But you see how it automatically sets up the next arc. So in this case, it works pretty well. But if I was going to come back and do it really tight, I might have to just come back re-click on that last point and it resets it. So now it's not giving me that predictive arc, and I can do whatever I want with it. So I could do that, and you'll see a big example of it here. Because the last arc that I did was really large, the next one is going to be really large, or at least that's what Illustrator is giving me. But I can get rid of that just by clicking directly on that last point, and it essentially resets my pen. So, and then from there, I can go through and trace over this whole thing, and then I can lay in areas of color and kind of make it work. Now, if you're building shapes, like if you're tracing over everything, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to do it really fast. Let's just say I did this part of his head, then of course I could fill in that area with whatever color that I wanted to use. So I could go to my swatches palette, which is open somewhere on here. So we're going to go to my, actually I don't want I want my swatch libraries. Let's go to I'm going to go to, let's see what earth tones look like. Now I'm just doing this to kind of show you, and you can click and drag and fill in different areas of these shapes like that, or like that, or like that. Whatever you wanted to do. That's one way that you could do it. So basically, you want to think in terms of different shapes and different forms, but keeping it as smooth and as simple as possible. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks.